I'd like to acknowledge the presence of all of our graduates here today, and thank you for being here this morning. It's always a great opportunity for us to celebrate too your many accomplishments, because we've watched you over these past several years and prayed for you, and it's wonderful to see how far you've come. And just know that we are always here to support you, and that we'll continue to pray for you. And this will always be your home. And so we'll always welcome you here, and we're very happy for you today. Several years back, it was when I was a freshman in college, I heard a speech that really impacted my life. And I'm not going to do it justice at all. I don't even remember the guy's name who gave it, but it really came down to 3 words. He said, "There are no neutral contacts." No neutral contacts. And what he meant by this was that every person's life who comes into contact with ours, we are either helping them come closer to Jesus and his church or driving them further away. There's no neutral contacts with other people. We are either helping them or not. And that's really stuck with me, because it shows that we have such an important role and task to play, and we want to maximize this opportunity, because every person that we come across has an immortal soul, and they will live in eternity. One soul, one eternity. And all of us want to live in the heavenly Jerusalem, and we want those people and everyone to come as well. And so we ought to maximize this by living our faith, both in word and in deed, and living the commandment that Jesus gave. Love one another as I have loved you. He said that this was new. The first part was not new, though, loving our neighbor. But the second part was, as I have loved you. So how has Jesus loved us? Well, in his hidden life, he loved in a very simple way, like ordinary way in his home. But then during his public ministry, he went around doing good and speaking the word of life to those who would hear him. And then at the end of his life, it culminated in his great sacrifice of laying down his life on the cross for each one of us. And as St. Paul says, Christ died for us while we were yet sinners, while we were his enemies. And so that's how we ought to love. We need to love those who cannot love us in return. We need to do good to those who cannot do good to us in return. We need to love even to the point of suffering for their sake, and to love as Jesus has, and to lay down our life for them. That's what Jesus is calling us to do. And if we love in that way, we can really have a powerful effect on people's life. And the scary thing is that Jesus says, this is the benchmark of being a disciple of him. To be a disciple means to love as he loved. And that's how we will know if we are disciples. And we all have had experiences of other people not living up to this, and how detrimental that is, how that hurts our faith when people give us a bad example, or when we ourselves have given others a bad example and perhaps driven them further away from Jesus and his church. But we have a great opportunity, because we can turn that around, and we have the whole future open to us, that we can offer them a witness and to bring them closer to him. And I want to share 2 examples today of that. The first one comes from our reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Right before where we pick up the story, this is what happened. St. Paul and Barnabas were in a town, and they didn't want to hear what they had to say, and so they took them outside, and they tried to stone them to death. And they thought they had accomplished it, but they hadn't. And St. Paul lived, and so he got up, and he walked to the next town. You know, if that's me, and I'm preaching a message, and they try to stone me to death in one town, I'm probably going to go home, okay? Not to the next town to try it again. But he did, and so there he is, bloody, bruised, standing in front of these people, and what does he tell them? We have to endure many hardships to enter the kingdom. What a witness that was. The fact that he loved them so much that he would risk even death for their sake. And so what happened? He strengthened the Christians that were there to persevere and made many converts because of his witness, because of his love. The other story comes from some time back in Poland. There was a young woman whose name was Sophie, and she applied to take a job as a governess, I think the modern term, we might call them a full-time nanny in this house. And so she went to the job interview with this mother, and the mother finds out, oh, you're a Catholic. She says, we are all Jewish. And so she has to think about, is that going to work? Because she really wants her family to not waver from their Jewish faith. And then she thinks about how many other nannies they've gone through recently. And so she tells Sophie, she says, it's kind of a tough job. These kids aren't very well behaved. And Sophie knows that she has to provide for her widowed mother, who's also sick, and her younger brothers. So she is undaunted by this. And then the woman says, the mother, she says, I'll put one stipulation on it. Just don't talk about your faith. And never let on that you are a Catholic in front of my children, because I don't want them to waver. And Sophie decided, okay, I'll do that. And the night before she started, she took out of her jewelry box a little locket, and she put something inside of it, and she always wore it around her neck. And the children, just as she had been told, were very difficult to handle, and they tried to tyrannize her, and they were just hard. But after a while, that began to change, and they started to become more obedient, and they listen and follow what she said, and slowly she could see a transformation in them. They also allowed Sophie to go to Mass on Sunday mornings, but only the mother knew that she was going to the early Mass. The rest of the family didn't know why she had left the house. And that's what sustained her, receiving the Eucharist through that whole time. And so at one point, the children wanted to ask, what is in that little locket? And she told them, it's a secret. I'm sorry, I can't show you. And eventually they changed, and things became good in the home. But then one day, one of the boys fell sick, and they took him to the doctor, and the doctor says, this is the epidemic that's going around, and you need to isolate him from everybody else and take care of him. And the mother said, I don't have time for that. I have to run this business. And so Sophie said, I'll do it. And she took care of that sick boy. The two other children also fell sick. And for 3 weeks, she lovingly cared for them and prayed for them and nursed them back to full health. But at the end of that, she contracted that illness, and she fell very sick and had to go to Warsaw to the hospital, and there she died. And 3 years later, that entire Jewish family had converted and become Catholic. And Sophie had never mentioned the name of Jesus, but she lived that with every fiber of her soul. And the children found out what the secret was in that little locket. After she died, they took the locket from around her neck and they opened it. And there was a little piece of paper inside that she had drawn a cross on top and wrote in little letters, since I am not able to speak about my faith, I will live it. Since I am not able to speak about my faith, I will live it. And she did. That's the kind of love that she showed, right? The type of love that Jesus did, to lay down her life in service of another. And we can see the profound effect that had on that entire family. And that's our opportunity too. If we live our faith, if we speak about our faith, then we can have a profound effect on other people. And it may feel like at times you can't speak about your faith, but that's not true. You know, whether it's in college or in work or somewhere else, we can always do that. And if we do that and love people with this new commandment of love, we can have a marvelous witness to the truth of our faith to them, and that will help them out. So my encouragement today is that we do that we live it, that we try to take what Jesus says seriously, that people will know that we are his disciples if we have this love in our hearts. That will be the benchmark for us. And today, let us ask God for the grace to do that at this Mass, to persevere and to live out the calling he has given to us.